The day we laid my grandmother to rest, her lawyer handed me a worn-out bank book, and my father threw it into the open grave as if it were worthless. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 31 years old. At my grandmother Eleanor's funeral, while the earth was still fresh and dark around her casket, her attorney approached me with a single item: a faded passbook savings account with her name embossed on the front. Before I could even process what I was holding, my father lunged forward, snatched it from my hands, and glanced at the meager balance written on the first page. Then, right there in front of 57 people, with the minister still holding his Bible and the wind tugging at the flower arrangements, he hurled it onto the casket. "It's worthless," he announced, his voice carrying across the silent cemetery. "Leave it buried with her." His wife Brenda stifled a laugh behind her gloved hand. His stepson Tyler had his phone out, capturing the entire scene on video. Not a single person spoke up. No one moved. So I stepped forward, knelt in the damp grass, and retrieved the soiled book from where it had fallen beside the grave. I didn't say a word. I just brushed the dirt off the cover and slipped it into my coat pocket. I drove straight to the bank. The teller typed the account number into her terminal, looked at the screen, and her face drained of color. She gripped the edge of her counter, steadying herself. "Do not leave this building," she said in a low, strained voice. "I'm calling the police." What that little brown book contained, and the devastating truth it exposed about my own father, would unravel my entire family. Before I tell you what happened at the bank, I need to take you back to the beginning, to the Sunday afternoons that set this whole chain of events into motion. For 3 years, every single Sunday, I drove the 15 minutes from town to my grandmother's house on Willow Lane. It was a modest white bungalow with peeling green shutters and a sprawling garden of petunias she'd tended for longer than I'd been alive. The porch steps groaned under your weight, and the paint was chipped, but to me, it was the safest place in the world. My father always told people, "Mom's scraping by. That old house is all she has." But I never visited because she asked me to. I visited because she was the only person in my life who never made me feel like I was a burden just for existing. We had a routine. I'd bring her groceries, the good rye bread from the bakery, not the cheap store brand. She'd have a pot of coffee brewing. I'd clean her kitchen, change her sheets, and sort her medications into the weekly pill organizers. Then, if the weather was warm, we'd sit on the porch. If it was cold, we'd sit at her worn kitchen table. And she'd tell me stories about my mother. No one else in the world told me stories about my mother. My mom, Olivia, died when I was just 10 years old. A car accident on a rainy Tuesday morning. I can still remember the cold cereal I was eating when the phone rang. I remember my father sitting on the kitchen floor, silent and broken, for almost a year afterward. But my grandmother Eleanor had a curious habit I never fully understood. On the first of every month, without fail, she'd sit at her little oak desk, pull out a small brown notebook, and meticulously write numbers in neat, orderly columns. When she was finished, she'd lock it in her top drawer and slip the key into her apron pocket. I asked her about it once. "What is that, Grandma?" She just smiled a secret smile. "Oh, just an old woman's habit, sweetheart, don't you worry about it." I didn't push. I wish I had. There was something else that bothered me. Every few months, my father would call her and offer to help manage her finances. Every time, she politely but firmly refused. Once, after she hung up on him, I saw her hands trembling. Not from weakness, but from something deeper. "He means well," she told me, but she wouldn't meet my eyes when she said it. I believed her then. I don't anymore. To understand the confrontation at the funeral, you have to understand what it was like growing up in my father's house. After my mother died, my father tried for a while. He really did. But then he just stopped. He sent me to live with Grandma Eleanor for 3 years when I was 12. Just until I get back on my feet, he'd said. When he met and married Brenda Peterson, he brought me back home, not because he missed me, but because Brenda insisted it looked bad for his daughter to be living with his mother while they were building their new family. Brenda had a son, Tyler, who was a year younger than me. He got the big bedroom with the bay window. I got the tiny room next to the garage, with one window and a heater that barely worked in winter. Tyler got a brand new truck for his 16th birthday. I bought a clunky 10-year-old sedan with my waitressing tips. In public, Brenda played the part of the perfect stepmother. We treat all our children the same, she'd coo to the neighbors. Behind closed doors, she'd tell my father, "Your daughter eats here, sleeps here, and contributes absolutely nothing." But I did contribute. I paid the electric bill every single month from the time I turned 19. My father never mentioned that. I earned my nursing degree at 23 and built a life for myself as a community health nurse. But when Grandma Eleanor got sick in 2022, I cut my hours to care for her. My income dropped, my savings evaporated. I ended up moving back into that cramped room next to the garage. My father told everyone he was supporting his adult daughter because she couldn't manage on her own. He never mentioned the electric bill. In the fall of 2022, Eleanor was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. The doctor said she could stay at home if she had consistent care. So I rearranged my entire life to be there. 3 days a week I worked at the clinic. The other 4, I was at her house, bathing her, cooking soft meals, driving 40 minutes to her cardiology appointments, and sorting her pills into little plastic organizers. My father visited her 3 times in 2 years. I counted. Each time, he sat at her kitchen table and said the same thing. "Mom, just let me handle your accounts. It would make everything easier." Each time, she shook her head. Each time, he left within an hour. Brenda never came once. Tyler showed up one afternoon, stood in her doorway, looked around her small house, and asked, "So Grandma, you got anything put away for when you're, gone?" Eleanor just stared at him and said nothing. He left after 12 minutes. One afternoon in early 2023, I was sorting her mail at the kitchen counter and found a bank statement lying open. A number caught my eye, a withdrawal for $15,000, dated March 2023. "Grandma, did you take out $15,000? She didn't look up from her crossword puzzle. "Grandma made a mistake, dear, don't worry about it. I let it go, I shouldn't have." That same week, I passed her bedroom door and heard her on the phone, her voice low and careful. "Make sure it's airtight, Warren, he'll try." She hung up before I could ask her about it. That night, she held my hand at the kitchen table and said something that didn't make sense until weeks after she was gone. "When I die, take the book in the drawer. Don't let your father have it. Promise me." I promised. October 5th was a Sunday. I drove to her house the same way I always had, radio off, windows down, breathing in the smell of wood smoke and dry leaves. The front door was unlocked. The coffee pot was cold. I found her in bed, her hands folded over her old Bible. She looked like she was sleeping, except the room was unnaturally still. No ticking clock, no shallow breathing from the oxygen machine I'd set up beside her bed. I sat on the edge of her bed and held her hand. It was cool and stiff. I didn't cry, I just sat there. The room smelled like lavender and old paper, just as it always had. I called 911. Then I called my father. He arrived 2 hours later, without Brenda. His first words when he walked through the door, "Did she have a will?" Not "How did she go?" Not "Are you okay?" Just a cold question about her estate. I watched him move through the house like a predator. He opened the desk drawers, then the filing cabinet, then the closet in her bedroom, while she was still lying right there. He rifled through shoeboxes, old envelopes, and folders, desperately searching for something. I remembered her words. I quietly opened the top drawer of her writing desk, the one she always kept locked. The lock was broken now. Inside was the small brown savings book, its cover faded and its spine cracked, with her name on the first page, Eleanor Mitchell. Tucked inside it was a slip of paper in her handwriting, "Bring this to the bank. Ask for Janet." Trust me, Grandma, I slid the book into my purse before my father returned to the room. He searched for another hour. He never found what he was looking for. The funeral was held at Grace Community Church, a small stone chapel on Main Street where Eleanor had attended services for 40 years. About 57 people came. In our small town of Millbrook, that's a huge crowd. It meant she was loved. My father wore a dark suit I'd never seen before. Brenda wore a chic black dress, the kind you buy to make sure people notice your grief. Tyler wore sneakers and spent the entire service checking his phone. My father stood at the pulpit and delivered a eulogy that made my skin crawl. "My mother lived a simple life," he said, his voice cracking dramatically. "She didn't have much, but she had love. That's what matters." Brenda dabbed her eyes in the front pew. Two women behind me whispered, "What a devoted son." I sat in the front row and said nothing. I knew he hadn't called her on her birthday. I knew he hadn't visited when she had pneumonia in January. I knew he'd searched her house before her body was even cold. But this was his stage, and my father had always been a master of performance. After the service, Brenda hugged everyone at the door. "Eleanor was like a mother to me," she told each person, one after another. My grandmother had once told me, "That woman hasn't called me in 4 years." Outside, I saw Tyler taking a selfie in the parking lot, leaning against his car with a wide smile. At a funeral. Peggy Calloway, Eleanor's oldest friend, a 74-year-old woman with a spine of steel, saw it too. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. And in the back row of the church, I noticed someone I didn't expect, a gray-haired man in a quiet suit. Warren Holt, the family attorney. He caught my eye and nodded. Just once. I didn't know yet what that nod meant. At the cemetery, they lowered the casket into the ground. The October wind was biting, scattering dried leaves across the fresh dirt. 57 people stood in a silent half-circle. Then, Warren Holt stepped forward. He approached me, not my father, and held out a manila envelope. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this," he said. Personally, before I could open it, my father's hand shot out and snatched it. "What is this?" He tore it open. Inside was a savings book, identical to the one already in my purse. He flipped it open, read the balance, and laughed. $4,200. He threw it onto the casket. It bounced once and slid into the mound of loose earth beside the grave. "It's worthless," he declared. "Let it stay buried with her. That's all she ever had." Brenda covered her mouth, but I could see the smile hiding behind her fingers. Tyler had his phone out, recording. $4,000, he snorted. I spend that in a month. 57 people stood there in stunned silence. Nobody spoke. Peggy Calloway's hands were clenched into fists at her sides. A few neighbors looked away. I stood very still for a moment. Then I stepped forward, knelt at the edge of the grave, and picked up the savings book from the dirt. I brushed it off carefully. I put it in the inside pocket of my coat, over my heart. I didn't say a word. My father watched me. His face twisted. You want that junk? Fine, that's your inheritance. Don't come asking me for anything else. That evening, I drove back to my father's house. The porch light was on. The door was locked. I found my clothes on the hallway floor, not in suitcases, but in black trash bags. 3 of them. My books were in a cardboard box, my nursing textbooks stacked on top of my mother's old quilt, the one I'd kept since I was 10. Brenda opened the door. She didn't step aside. Tyler needs the room for his home office, she said coolly. Your father agrees. My father appeared behind her, arms crossed. You're 31, Sarah. Time to figure it out. You're throwing me out the night of Grandma's funeral? Don't be dramatic. You've had years to save up. I had only $1,800 in my checking account. Enough for a deposit on the cheapest studio in Millbrook, maybe, but not enough for a second month. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I picked up the trash bags with my name on them and loaded them into my Civic. I sat in the driveway for 10 minutes. The porch light went off. I called Peggy Calloway. Come stay with me tonight, sweetheart, she said. No questions, no hesitation. Eleanor would have wanted that. At Peggy's kitchen table at 11 o'clock that night, I opened the savings book I'd rescued from the grave, dirt still clinging to its spine, $4,200. And tucked between the last page and the back cover was a slip of paper in my grandmother's handwriting. Go to the bank. Ask for Janet. The book opens the door. The book opens the door. What door? I didn't sleep that night, but by morning I had a plan. The next morning I walked into Millbrook's First Community Bank at 9:05 a.m. I was still wearing yesterday's black dress under my coat, my hair uncombed, my eyes swollen from crying. The lobby was small, with 3 teller windows and a tired potted fern. 2 customers were ahead of me. I waited. When I reached the counter, I said, I'd like to speak with Janet, please. The young teller blinked. Janet Rios? She's our senior account officer. Do you have an appointment? No, but my grandmother told me to ask for her. Something in my voice made the teller pick up the phone. Janet Rios appeared 2 minutes later. She was mid-40s, with reading glasses on a chain and a firm handshake. She led me to a glass-walled office at the back. I placed the savings book on her desk. She opened it, typed the account number into her computer, paused, and typed it again. She looked at the screen, then at me, then at the screen again. Excuse me for a moment, she said. She stood up, stepped out, and closed the door behind her. Through the glass wall, I watched her make a phone call. Her expression changed drastically. She pressed her hand flat against the wall to steady herself. Then she came back in, her face pale. Miss Mitchell, this savings account is linked to a trust, an irrevocable trust. You are listed as the sole beneficiary. I stared at her. A trust? I need to call our compliance department, she paused. And I need to contact the police. Please don't leave. The police? Why? There are unauthorized transactions on a linked account. Someone accessed funds using a power of attorney that our records show was revoked over 2 years ago. The room tilted. I gripped the armrests of my chair. How much is in the trust? Janet looked at me like she was deciding if I could handle the answer. She turned her monitor so I could see it and pointed at a number near the top of the screen, $2,317,000. I read it 3 times. I read it a 4th time because I was shaking and couldn't believe my eyes. 2 million, my voice broke. 2,317,000, Janet confirmed quietly. Held in an irrevocable trust established in 2017. Administered by this bank as corporate trustee. The sole named beneficiary is Sarah Marie Mitchell. She began explaining. The trust had been funded over decades. My grandmother had worked as a bookkeeper at a local manufacturing plant for 31 years. She'd contributed to a pension. She'd received life insurance proceeds from my grandfather's passing in 2005. Approximately $350,000. In 2010, she'd sold 80 acres of family farmland west of town, land that had appreciated significantly. The sale netted roughly $1.2 million. The rest was accumulated interest and dividends. She lived in an 800-square-foot house, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, Janet said, by choice. She grew up during rationing, remembered what it was like to have nothing, and never wanted to feel that way again. She wore the same cardigans, clipped coupons, and grew tomatoes to can them. Not because she had to, but because she remembered. My father had told everyone she was poor. He'd believed it himself. He'd never bothered to look deeper. The trust is irrevocable, Janet continued. It cannot be contested or modified. Your grandmother designed it with her attorney to be, her words, unbreakable. I stared at the number until my vision blurred, not because of the money, but because she had planned this. She knew my father would throw the book away, and she'd bet everything on the chance that I would pick it up. Grandma Eleanor had always been the quietest person in the room. It turned out she was also the smartest. The police arrived within the hour, 2 officers, one in uniform and one in a gray suit who introduced himself as a detective from the County Fraud Division. They sat across from me in Janet's office while she pulled records on her screen. Here's what we're seeing, Janet said, turning her monitor toward the detective. In 2023, 3 withdrawals were made from a linked checking account using a durable power of attorney in the name of Robert Mitchell. $15,000 in March, $12,000 in June, $13,000 in September. Total, $40,000. The detective made a note. And the power of attorney was revoked by Eleanor Mitchell on January 9, 2023. We have the revocation on file. Every transaction after that date was unauthorized. My stomach turned. March 2023. That was the withdrawal I'd seen on the bank statement at Grandma's house, the one she'd called a mistake. She hadn't made a mistake. She'd been robbed by her own son. And she knew the whole time. She didn't tell me because she didn't want me to worry, or maybe because she was already building something stronger than worry. The detective turned to me. Miss Mitchell, were you aware of these transactions? No, I saw one statement. She told me it was an error. I believed her. This falls under elder financial exploitation. Under Ohio law, it's a felony. We'll need to open a formal investigation. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Outside the bank, I sat in my car for 20 minutes. My father had stolen, from his own mother, while she was losing her memory, $40,000. And she knew, and instead of confronting him, she'd built a fortress around everything else and left me the key. That bank statement on her kitchen counter hadn't been carelessness, she'd wanted me to see it. She'd planted a seed I wouldn't understand for 2 more years. In Millbrook, news doesn't just travel, it detonates. By the next afternoon, half the town had heard some version of the story. Eleanor Mitchell, the quiet old woman in the cardigan, had left her granddaughter a fortune. And her son hadn't received a dime. My phone rang at 6 p.m. It was my father. Whatever that crazy old woman put in some trust, it's not yours. I'm her son. I'm contesting it. It's irrevocable, Dad. You can't contest it. Watch me. He hired a lawyer, Dennis Pratt, from the strip mall on Oak Street. Not exactly a trust litigation specialist. Pratt apparently told him the truth. An irrevocable trust with a corporate trustee was nearly impossible to overturn. My father told him to try anyway. Then came Brenda. She called the next day with a sweet, concerned voice, the one she used for church fundraisers and parent-teacher nights. Sarah, honey, think about what this is doing to your father. He's heartbroken. Eleanor was his mother. Sharing would be the right thing. It's what family does. I didn't answer. She waited. Sarah, are you there? I'm here, Brenda. So what do you think? I think my grandmother made her decision. I'm honoring it. Click. That evening, Tyler posted on Facebook a photo of a generic headstone with the caption, "Some people will do anything for money, even rob their own grandfather's grave." 47 reactions, 12 comments, most of them from people who hadn't attended the funeral and knew nothing about my grandmother. The town was splitting. Some sided with my father, the heartbroken son passed over by a confused old woman. Others knew better. They'd seen who actually showed up on Sundays. Okay, let me step outside the story for a second. At this point, I was sitting in Peggy's guest bedroom, holding a savings book with grave dirt still in the spine, and my father was threatening me with lawyers. So here's my honest question for you. If your father, the man who threw your grandmother's last gift onto her grave and called it garbage, suddenly demanded you hand over what she left you, would you give it up just to keep the peace? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know because at that moment, I almost considered it. Almost, all right, back to what happened next. And trust me, it gets worse before it gets better. 2 days after the bank visit, I sat in Warren Holt's office on the second floor of a brick building on Maple Street. He had an oak desk, law books from floor to ceiling, and a photograph of him and my grandfather fishing at Salt Fork Lake, circa 1988. Warren was 67, calm the way old trees are calm. He folded his hands and told me everything. Your grandmother came to me in 2017, he said. She sat in that same chair. She said, "My son will try to take everything. I know him. I need this to be unbreakable." He explained the trust structure, irrevocable, with a corporate trustee, the bank itself, not a person my father could pressure or intimidate. Sarah Marie Mitchell as sole beneficiary. The savings book was designed as a physical activation key. I had to present it in person with valid identification to trigger the verification process. Why the savings book? I asked. Warren almost smiled. Because she knew Robert. He'd tear the house apart looking for legal documents, wills, contracts, deeds. He'd never give a second thought to an old passbook showing $4,000. She was right. He threw it on her grave. Then Warren told me the rest. In 2023, your grandmother discovered the unauthorized withdrawals. She contacted me immediately. I reported the fraudulent POA usage to the bank's compliance division at her request, but she instructed me not to act further. Why not? Her exact words were, "Let him dig his own grave. The truth will come out when it needs to." Warren leaned forward. "Your grandmother didn't want revenge, Sarah. She wanted protection for you, but she was also not going to let her son steal from her without consequence." Eleanor Mitchell, 5'3", clip-on earrings, clipped coupons every Thursday. And she built a legal trap so precise that her own son walked straight into it and never saw the walls. My father didn't just hire a lawyer, he launched a campaign. Within a week, he'd called every relative in 3 counties, aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen since my mother's funeral. His version of events was polished. "My own daughter is stealing my mother's money." Mom was confused at the end. She didn't know what she was signing. Some of them called me, not to accuse, but to advise. "Maybe you should split it, Sarah. It's the right thing to do. Don't let money destroy family." The calls came every day, a slow, steady drip of guilt dressed up as concern. Then Brenda escalated. She organized what she called a family meeting at my father's house. Invited 10 relatives. I was not invited. I heard about it from Aunt Carol, my father's younger sister, the only one who seemed unsure about whose side to take. At the meeting, my father reportedly cried. "My mother skipped her own son," he told the room. What did I do wrong? Brenda proposed a solution, a 50-50 split. "Fair is fair," she said. Several heads nodded. The meeting was about to end when a car pulled into the driveway, a small blue sedan. Peggy Calloway got out, walked to the front door, stood on the porch, and spoke loud enough for everyone inside to hear. 6 words. Then she turned around and drove away. The room went quiet. My father's face changed color, and for the first time since the funeral, nobody called me that night. Peggy told me what she'd said the next morning over breakfast, toast and black coffee. I said, "I know why Eleanor did this." "That's it." Then your father tried to explain. He said it was because she was losing her mind. So I gave him one more sentence. Peggy sipped her coffee. I said her mind was sharper than yours ever was, Robert. She kept records of everything. In Millbrook, that sentence carries weight. Because in a town this small, everyone has something they don't want on record. My father would have known exactly what that meant. The POA, the withdrawals, the paper trail. Aunt Carol called me that afternoon. Her voice was different, cautious. "Sarah, what records is Peggy talking about?" "You'd have to ask Peggy. Robert says she's just a crazy old woman trying to stir things up." Peggy's 74. She ran the county library for 30 years. She's not crazy. A pause. "I'm starting to think there's more to this than your father's telling us." "There is, Aunt Carol, but it's not my story to leak. It'll come out on its own." The calls from relatives slowed down, not all at once, but noticeably. A few people quietly withdrew their support. "This is between you and your father," one cousin texted. "I'm staying out of it." That evening, Peggy set a cup of chamomile tea on my nightstand. She sat on the edge of the guest bed and said, "Eleanor left me something for you. A letter. But she made me promise I could only give it to you after the trust was fully settled." "Not yet, sweetheart, soon. What does it say?" Peggy patted my hand. "It says everything you need to hear, but you're not ready yet. Your grandmother was quiet, Sarah, but quiet people keep the best records." The county fraud detective called my father on a Thursday morning. I know this because my father called me 14 minutes later. I know it was 14 minutes because I looked at my call log afterward, trying to piece together how fast a man can go from threatening to begging. Fast. The answer was fast. Sarah, please. His voice was different now, thin, stripped of bravado. Call off the investigation. I'm your father. Don't do this to me. I didn't start this, Dad. The bank flagged it. I can't call off anything even if I wanted to. If I go down for this, it'll destroy the family. Is that what you want? I closed my eyes. You destroyed it a long time ago. You just didn't notice. Silence. Then the line went dead. Brenda called 20 minutes later. No more sweet voice, no more church fundraiser warmth. The mask was off. Listen to me carefully, Sarah. If you don't drop this, we will make sure everyone in Millbrook knows you manipulated a sick old woman to steal from your own father. Go ahead, Brenda. The truth is on my side. Truth? She almost spat the word. You think truth matters in a town like this? People believe what they want to believe. Then, I guess we'll find out. She hung up. That same week, my father filed a petition to contest the trust on grounds of undue influence. He claimed I had manipulated Grandma Eleanor during her cognitive decline to redirect her assets. His lawyer, Dennis Pratt, filed it knowing it was a long shot. My father filed it because he had no choice. The investigation wasn't just about the trust anymore. It was about $40,000. A forged power of attorney, and a felony charge that didn't care about family meetings or Facebook posts. Warren Holt called me into his office a week later. He was seated behind his oak desk, a manila folder open in front of him, and for the first time since I'd known him, he was smiling. Robert's petition claims undue influence, Warren said. To win, he'd need to prove your grandmother was mentally compromised when she created the trust in 2017, and that you coerced her. She wasn't compromised. She was sharper than anyone in the family. I know, and I can prove it. He slid 3 documents across the desk. First, a cognitive capacity evaluation performed by Dr. Reeves in April 2017, the same month the trust was executed. Eleanor scored in the 93rd percentile. Clear mind, clear intent. He tapped the second document, bank records showing the forged POA transactions. This establishes Gerald's financial motive to contest the trust. Not grief, not fairness, but money. And the third, Warren turned his laptop toward me. On the screen was a Facebook video, Tyler's video filmed at the cemetery. You could clearly see my father snatching the savings book, reading the balance, laughing, and throwing it onto the casket. His voice sharp and unmistakable. It's worthless. Let it stay buried. Tyler had posted it to mock me. 47 reactions, some laughing emojis. He'd titled it, Grandma's Big Inheritance. LOL. Tyler handed us the strongest piece of evidence we have, Warren said. This video shows your father had no emotional attachment to your grandmother's legacy. It contradicts everything in his petition. No judge will look at this and see a grieving son. I stared at the screen. Tyler had recorded his own family's undoing and posted it online for likes. Gerald's lawyer reportedly advised him to withdraw the petition. My father refused. Some people can't stop digging, even when they're already standing in the hole. There was a night I won't pretend there wasn't when I nearly gave in. It was 11 p.m. at Peggy's house. The guest room was dark. The savings book sat on the nightstand, the dirt from the grave now dry and cracked in its spine. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about my father, not this version, but the earlier one. The one who put me on his shoulders at the county fair when I was 5. The one who made pancakes on Saturday mornings before my mom died. the one who cried at the kitchen table the day she was gone. Really cried, the kind where your whole body shakes. That man was still in there somewhere, buried under Brenda, under debt, under 20 years of choosing the wrong thing. I picked up my phone. I almost called him. I was going to say, "Take it. Take all of it. I don't want to fight anymore." Then Peggy appeared in the doorway. She couldn't sleep either. She set a cup of chamomile on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed. "Eleanor told me something once," Peggy said. She said, "If Sarah gives in, Robert will spend every cent in 2 years. Then he'll blame her for not having anything left." I put the phone down. "You're not fighting him, Sarah. You're honoring her. There's a difference." I looked at the savings book. The dirt was dry now, but I could still see the faint impression of a fingerprint on the cover. Grandma Eleanor's. She had held this book thousands of times, updating it, protecting it, planning. She didn't leave me money. She left me a choice. I wasn't going to waste it. November came in cold. The investigation was still open, the petition was still pending, and the town was still whispering. Then the invitation arrived. Not a formal invitation, just a group text from Brenda to the extended family, Thanksgiving at our house. All family welcome. Time to come together. I wasn't included in the group text. Aunt Carol forwarded it to me with a one-line message, "You should come. Family is family." I knew what this was. My father and Brenda wanted a stage, a room full of relatives, a Thanksgiving table, and an audience for their version of reconciliation. They wanted to pressure me to share the money in front of everyone, make me the villain if I said no, make it about family instead of fraud. I called Warren. "You don't owe them anything," he said. "But if you go, go prepared." He gave me copies, a summary of the trust's legal standing, the list of unauthorized POA transactions with dates and amounts, the revocation document from January 2023. "Not weapons," he said, "just facts in case someone asks questions, and if they don't ask, then you eat turkey and leave. But I've met your father, Sarah. He won't be able to resist making a speech." Warren was right. My father had never met a room he didn't want to perform in. I spent the night before Thanksgiving at Peggy's. She ironed my blouse, and I made corn casserole, Grandma Eleanor's recipe, the one with the Ritz crackers on top. Peggy squeezed my arm at the door. "Eleanor would be proud of you," she said. "Eleanor would tell me to bring a bigger casserole." Peggy laughed. It was the first time in weeks. I drove to my father's house on Thanksgiving morning. I hadn't been inside since the night they'd put my clothes in trash bags. 15 people were gathered around a long table with a white tablecloth. Brenda had probably bought it that morning. Candles flickered, and the turkey was too brown on one side. The house smelled like rosemary and something artificial, one of Brenda's plug-in air fresheners. I set my corn casserole on the counter. A few relatives hugged me, others just nodded. Tyler didn't look up from his phone. My father shook my hand like I was a business associate, not his daughter. Brenda seated me at the far end of the table next to the wall. I didn't protest. We made it through the salad. Then my father stood up and tapped his water glass with a butter knife. The room quieted. "Before we eat," he said, "I want to say a few words." He thanked everyone for coming, talked about family and gratitude, standard Thanksgiving material. Then the turn. As many of you know, there's been some confusion about my mother's estate. He paused, looked down at his plate, then looked up. "I want to be clear. My mother was a simple woman. She lived simply, and if she made certain decisions near the end of her life, it was because she was influenced by someone she trusted too much. He looked directly at me. 15 heads turned. Brenda jumped in. We just want what's fair. Eleanor would have wanted her son to be taken care of. Sarah knows that. Tyler, with his mouth full of bread, said, Yeah, Sarah, just do the right thing. 15 people, candles flickering, the room waiting for me to fold. I set down my fork. I placed my napkin beside my plate. I stood up. My father's eyes narrowed. Brenda's hand moved to his arm. Tyler finally put down his phone. I'd spent 31 years being the quiet one at the end of the table. Tonight, I had something to say. My voice was steady. I made sure of that. You want to talk about what Grandma Eleanor wanted? Okay. Let's talk. The room held its breath. Dad, you visited her 3 times in 2 years. I was there every Sunday. I changed her sheets. I drove her to every cardiology appointment. I held her hand when she couldn't sleep. My father opened his mouth, but I didn't stop. You told everyone she was poor. She wasn't poor. She chose to live simply. There's a difference. I reached into the folder I'd brought in with the casserole dish. I placed a single sheet of paper on the table and slid it toward the center so everyone could see it. In 2023, someone used a forged power of attorney to withdraw $40,000 from Grandma Eleanor's bank account. $15,000 in March, $12,000 in June, $13,000 in September. Silence. The candle nearest me flickered. The police are investigating. The name on that power of attorney is Robert Mitchell. A fork hit a plate somewhere down the table. Aunt Carol pressed her hand over her mouth. Brenda went pale. My father's chair scraped back. That's a lie. She gave me permission. She revoked the power of attorney on January 9th, 2023. Every withdrawal after that is fraud. I kept my voice level. Elder financial abuse under Ohio law. That's a felony, Dad. Nobody moved. Nobody reached for the mashed potatoes or refilled a glass. The turkey sat in the center of the table untouched, going cold. My father looked at the faces around him, his brother-in-law, his cousins, his sister. Every one of them staring back with the same expression, the slow, terrible dawn of understanding. I didn't come here to fight. I came here because you invited me to a family table. So here's the family truth. Brenda shot to her feet. This is ridiculous. Sarah is twisting everything. Robert loved his mother. The room didn't move. Aunt Carol, my father's younger sister, the one who'd forwarded me the invitation, spoke for the first time. Quiet, careful, Robert, is it true? Did you forge that power of attorney? My father stared at the table. His jaw worked, but no words came. That silence was louder than anything he'd ever said from a pulpit. Brenda tried again, turning on me with her finger raised. You ungrateful little. I wouldn't finish that sentence, Brenda. The voice came from behind me. Peggy Calloway stepped through the kitchen doorway. She'd been there since before the meal started. I'd asked her to come, and she'd insisted on waiting in the kitchen. Just in case, she'd said. Just in case was now. Peggy held a small cassette recorder, an old-fashioned one with a mini tape. Eleanor kept every letter, every voicemail, including the one where you told Robert to, and I'm quoting, clean out the old woman's account before she changes her mind. Brenda's face collapsed. I didn't. January 15th, 2023, Robert's voicemail box. Eleanor heard it when she was visiting his house. She called me that night. She played it for me over the phone. And she recorded it. The room exhaled. Uncle Jim leaned back in his chair and covered his eyes. Cousin Brian pushed his plate away. Carol turned to Tyler. "And wasn't that your video? The one from the funeral, Robert throwing the savings book on the casket. You posted it online." Tyler stood up. "I was just joking around. A judge won't think so," Carol said. Kyle looked at his phone, his thumbs moving fast, deleting, but screenshots live forever in a small town. The candles were still burning. The turkey was ice cold. Nobody was eating. I looked around the table, 15 faces, some stunned, some ashamed. A few looking at my father the way you look at someone you thought you knew. I took a breath and kept my voice even. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone. The facts are on the table, literally." I picked up the sheet of paper and folded it, putting it back in my folder. "Dad, I don't want your apology. I don't need it. What I need is for you to understand I'm not giving up what Grandma Eleanor left me. Not half, not $1. Because she didn't leave it to me as a gift. She left it to me as a boundary." My father's eyes were wet, whether from shame or self-pity I couldn't tell, maybe both. "She knew you wouldn't take care of her. She knew Brenda would push you to take everything. She knew Tyler would laugh." I paused. "And she still loved you, Dad. She just didn't trust you." I picked up my coat from the back of my chair. "And I don't either. Not anymore." My father reached across the table. "Sarah, please, I won't be coming back to this house. You have my number if you ever want to have an honest conversation. But I won't hold my breath." I looked at the room one last time, at the white tablecloth, at the casserole I'd made with my grandmother's recipe, at Brenda sitting rigid, staring at nothing, at Tyler with his phone in his lap, his face flushed. "Happy Thanksgiving, everyone," I walked out. Peggy followed. Behind me, I heard nothing. No shouting, no chair scraping, just the kind of silence that settles over a room when everyone in it is recalculating who they've been defending. I didn't need their approval to live my life, and Grandma Eleanor made sure I didn't need their permission either. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, my father was formally summoned by the county prosecutor's office. The charge, elder financial exploitation, a third-degree felony under Ohio Revised Code, punishable by up to 5 years. He needed a criminal defense attorney now, not Dennis Pratt from the strip mall. A real one. The retainer alone was $12,000, money he didn't have. He put it on the credit card that was already carrying the Brenda-approved kitchen renovation from last year. The house, still mortgaged at $180,000, was now bleeding money from 3 directions: mortgage, legal fees, and the $40,000 he'd have to repay if the court ordered restitution. He withdrew his petition to contest the trust. His attorney advised him in writing that continuing the civil case while facing criminal charges for the same underlying conduct was, in legal terms, catastrophic. Millbrook did the rest. In a town of 4,000 people, reputation is currency, and my father's account was overdrawn. His plumbing clients started canceling, one after another. The phone stopped ringing. Brenda's friends at Grace Community Church, the same women she'd hugged at the funeral, stopped saving her a seat at Wednesday Bible study. Tyler deleted his Facebook account entirely and started spending weekdays at Brenda's sister's place 2 towns over. I heard all of this secondhand. From Carol, from Peggy, from the woman at the post office who sold me stamps and said, I always wondered why Eleanor lived alone. I didn't report him. The bank did. I didn't leak the story. The town talked. I didn't campaign against him. I just stopped covering for him. All I did was pick up a book from the dirt. Everything else he built himself. Let me step out of the story for a moment. People have asked me if I feel guilty about what happened to my father. Honestly, I've asked myself that every night since Thanksgiving. He's still my dad. He taught me to ride a bike before my mom died. But here's what I've learned. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them steal from the people you love most. So I want to ask you, has anyone in your life ever used the word family to pressure you into giving up something you deserved? Tell me in the comments. Your stories matter to me. Now let me tell you about the letter. The trust was officially confirmed in the first week of December. Warren Holt called me to sign the final distribution paperwork. When I left his office, I drove to Peggy's house. She was waiting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea on my side, and in front of her was a sealed envelope, cream-colored, my name on the front in blue ink. Grandma Eleanor's handwriting, the same careful cursive from the savings book, from the grocery lists she left on the counter, from the birthday cards she never missed. She made me promise, Peggy said. Only after it was settled. I opened it with shaking hands. 3 pages of yellow legal paper, blue pen. Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And you did what I asked. You kept the book. I knew you would. I knew because you're the only one who ever kept showing up. I had to stop. My vision blurred. I kept reading. I'm sorry I couldn't give this to you while I was alive. If Robert knew, he would have found a way to take it. He's my son, and I love him. But I see who he is. I've seen it for a long time. This money isn't a reward, sweetheart, it's a head start. Use it to build the life you deserve, the one your mother would have given you if she'd had more time. Don't hate your father. He's lost. But don't sacrifice yourself for his mistakes either. You are allowed to choose yourself. Love. Grandma Eleanor P.S. I hope you still make my chicken soup on Sundays. I folded the letter, pressed it against my chest, and for the first time since she died, I cried. Really cried, the kind where your whole body shakes. Peggy didn't say a word. She just put her hand on mine and let me fall apart at her kitchen table. Then she said, "There's one more thing Eleanor left, not in the letter, in her house." Peggy drove me to Grandma Eleanor's house. It was exactly as I'd left it, petunias dead from the frost, porch steps still creaking, the lavender air freshener fading, but still there if you breathed deep enough. She led me to the basement, past the furnace, past the shelf of canned tomatoes, to a corner behind the water heater where a wooden box sat on an old towel. It was small, maybe a foot wide, dark walnut, and carved into the lid in letters smoothed by time, and touch was a single name. Olivia, my mother's name. I knelt on the concrete floor and opened it. Inside was a journal in my mother's handwriting, entries from when she was pregnant with me. The baby kicked today, right side just below my ribs. I think she's going to be stubborn. Beneath the journal, a small stack of photographs, my parents on their wedding day, my mother laughing, my father young and thin and looking at her like she was the only person in the frame. My mother holding me as a newborn, still in her hospital gown. Under the photographs, a silver bracelet with a thin chain and no clasp. My mother had worn it every day. And at the very bottom, a birthday card, handwritten, unfinished, "Happy 11th birthday. My little, she died 6 weeks before I turned 11. She never finished the card." My father had thrown this box away when he cleared out the house for Brenda. Grandma Eleanor had found it in the trash. She kept it for 20 years, waiting for me. I sat on the basement floor in a house that smelled like lavender and canned tomatoes and held my mother's bracelet against my wrist. My grandmother hadn't just protected my future, she'd protected my past. My grandmother didn't just protect my future, she protected my past. I used a portion of the trust to buy a house, nothing grand, a 2-bedroom cottage on Birch Lane, 6 minutes from Grandma Eleanor's old place. White siding, a front porch just big enough for 2 chairs. I planted petunias along the walkway, the same variety she grew. I went back to work full-time, community health nursing. Same clinic, same patients, same 12-hour shifts. I didn't quit. I didn't buy a boat. I didn't fly to Paris. I hired a financial advisor Warren recommended and put a plan together, conservative, long-term, the way Grandma Eleanor would have wanted it. I'm not rich. I'm secure. There's a difference. She taught me that. My father took a plea deal in February, 3 years probation, full restitution of $40,000 paid in installments, and 200 hours of community service. It went on his record. In Millbrook, a record follows you to the grocery store. Brenda stopped attending church. Tyler moved to Columbus and didn't leave a forwarding address. I don't talk to my father. I didn't block his number, but I'm not opening the door. Aunt Carol calls me every other Sunday. Now we're building something slowly. It's small, but it's real. Every Sunday morning, I drive to Millbrook Memorial Cemetery. I bring fresh flowers, petunias in summer, mums in fall, holly in winter. I sit on the bench near her headstone, and I talk to her. I tell her about my patients, about the house, about the petunias. I think she hears me, or maybe I just need to believe she does. Either way, I keep showing up. Every Sunday, same as always. Sunday morning, in my kitchen. The windows are open and the early light is falling across the counter in long, warm stripes. I'm making chicken soup, Grandma Eleanor's recipe. Carrots cut thick, not thin. She was very specific about that. Celery from the garden. A whole chicken, not parts. Parts are for people in a hurry, she'd say. Sarah, we're not in a hurry. On the wall above my stove, there's a small frame. Inside it is a faded brown savings book, now clean, the dirt gone. Beside it hangs a photograph of Grandma Eleanor on her porch, squinting in the sun, wearing her clip-on earrings and one of her 3 cardigans. And next to that, a photograph of my mother, young and laughing, with the silver bracelet catching the light. My father threw that book onto a grave and called it worthless. But it was the most valuable thing anyone ever gave me. Not because of the money, but because it was proof that someone planned for me. Someone believed I was worth protecting, even when no one else did. If you're listening to this and someone in your life is telling you that you don't deserve what's yours, whether it's money, respect, or just a seat at the table, I want you to hear what my grandmother wrote in her letter. You are allowed to choose yourself. That's my story. If it meant something to you, leave a comment. Not for the algorithm, but for the next person scrolling through who needs to hear it today. And if you know someone who's been told they're not enough by the people who should have loved them loudest, share this with them. Check the description for more stories like this one. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Mind Unveiled Stories for more narratives that explore the depths of human experience. I'll see you next time. Take care of the people who show up for you.